The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are off to Colombia. Their office have announced that they're going on a short tour later this summer, where they're going to be hosted by the Vice President of Colombia for a trip to see the culture, the music, and meet with young people and women for what they're calling meaningful interactions. We've got into the habit slightly of calling these things a quasi-royal tour, because previous visits to Nigeria and New York have replicated slightly what they would have been doing in the royal family. But this is their chance to really step out and show what they can do on their own. The UK and the US governments both have some travel restrictions on Colombia and some warnings to tourists. The areas that they're going to are considered the most safe. In 2012, they launched this big campaign to overcome their reputation for kidnapping drugs, where they used the tagline, Colombia, the only risk is that you'll want to stay.
Colombia, el riesgo es que te quieres quedar.
When news of the tour was announced, people raised questions immediately about why the Sussexes felt safe going to Colombia when they don't feel safe coming to Britain. In a very recent interview, Prince Harry has said that he won't be bringing his wife to Britain because of the security concerns they face here. And we know that they haven't travelled to even places like Balmoral. Prince Harry hasn't stayed in royal residences, all because of these security concerns. Now, allies of the Sussexes would explain this very differently. They say that in the UK, the travel concerns are very specific. It's about guaranteeing their security given by the Met Police whenever they return to Britain. Overseas, they say, overseas governments will provide this protection for them. Their own security can often take their guns with them, which they can't do in the UK. So this time in Colombia, we'll expect to see them travel for a couple of days. And importantly, I think they feel that they will be welcomed in a country, whereas returning to Britain, they might face slightly more questions and slightly more protests from people who haven't necessarily agreed with everything they've said and done in the last few years. The trip to Colombia is just one of the few quite high-profile things the Sussexes have done in the last few weeks. Prince Harry has spoken to ITV, where he's talked about the phone hacking scandal.
I don't think there's anybody else in the world that is better suited to be able to see this through than myself. I'm trying to get justice for everybody.
And Harry and Meghan have both spoken to CBS, an American TV network, about their new project, the Parent Network.
So as we can see what's happening in the online space, we know that there's a lot of work to be done there.
In that interview, Meghan spoke again about her suicidal thoughts while she was in the royal family, in what was quite an emotional, personal interview that I don't think anybody was really expecting. The other reason they've been in the news was on the cover of People magazine in America, where Prince Harry's friends and allies, sources close to the Sussexes, have been talking about these security concerns again. What's been quite interesting to watch from afar is how these stories have been picked up both in Britain and in the US. There was a time, if you think back to those Oprah interviews, those Netflix documentaries, that memoir of Harry's, where everything they said and everything they did made pages and pages and pages of news and were talked about on all the American TV shows. And over here you'd have column after column dissecting what they were saying. This time around it hasn't been quite the same. They've been saying quite dramatic things. Prince Harry's been talking about how the Queen's cheering him on from heaven in his battle against the tabloids. Meghan's been talking about her mental health struggles in the royal family. Prince Harry's mentioned his mother in the context of phone hacking. All of these things at one time would have caused countless headlines. This time the response has been a little bit more muted. In Britain, there have been a few news stories, but not a huge follow-up. In America, there's been a real absence of debate on the big TV news channels and on those breakfast shows that really seem to set the tone for conversation in American households. So the question I suppose that Sussexes and their team around them might be asking is their star power waning slightly, and do they really care? For the last year or so, we've heard a lot of talk from the Sussex camp behind the scenes about how they'd really like to move on from this looking backwards. They don't really want to be talking negatively about their time in Britain and the royal family anymore, and they really want to concentrate on this new happy family life that they're building and these positive projects they've got in the pipeline. So this is why the interviews this week have been so surprising. We thought that Meghan was moving forward with her business line of jam and rosé wine, dog bowls and crockery. Prince Harry seemed to be focusing really hard on veterans and the Invictus Games. And these interviews have again taken us back to what was happening quite a few years ago now, while they were still in Britain and in the royal family. So this is something of a crunch time for the Sussexes. So at the real height of the Sussex drama, 2021, 2022, old palace hands over here, people who've been watching these royal scandals unfold for decades, spoke quite confidently about how they thought it would all fizzle out naturally. The theory was that the more the Duke and the Duchess of Sussex spoke about their experiences and made these big revelations, the more the public would become accustomed to it, and eventually it would all calm down. I must confess that when people were talking about this royal family drama sort of naturally coming to an end and fizzling out, I wasn't totally convinced, especially when there were more and more hints that there might be some more revelations to come. The problem they face is that to keep in the headlines, they need to be now saying things that are more and more dramatic about the royal family in order to get noticed. And in order for that conversation to continue, they're going to need to pull something a little bit more dramatic out of the bag. That said, do they even want to? We keep hearing that they want to be happy, they want to be positive, they want to move forward with their lives in California. So will they now need to focus on their businesses and their own interests? And can they exist in the public eye, and do they even want to? So what will be so interesting to watch as this Colombia trip happens is whether they still are box office on their own terms, or whether they're happy to carry on earning a living and making their own way without necessarily being the stars of the show. Royal Insight is a fortnightly video output by The Telegraph, where we give you our insider knowledge and analysis of the main royal stories. If you have any topics you'd like us to cover, please let us know in the comments section below, and visit our website for more royal content, news and analysis.